Welcome to Lucia Gabriela TV. Today is another amazing, incredible day to come to understand a lot more, a little deeper, and to start clarifying a little bit of what actually sexual healing is. Today we have an amazing, incredible Tantra practitioner, and she has been referred by one of our amazing speakers too, Heather. His name is Matthias Rose, and we're really excited to clarify more of what actually sexual healing is and what is not, and the code of ethic. So if you are watching today live, stay tuned until the end of these live stream, and also share with you your insight, your questions. We're going to be taking questions like in sometimes of the interview. We have great questions, and many of the questions are going to be like, they're going to sound like the kind of like same questions, but we actually doing it from different angles, and because sometimes we get lost in like the perspective of it, and so just pay attention to the questions, to the answers, and remember that we come from a place of love, in feeling in integrity, and having respect and honor to all the aspect of sexual healing, all the different modalities that can be applied and all the different levels. So we're really excited about today. So we're gonna introduce Matthias into our setting. Here you go. Hi. You here?
Hi.
So tell us a little bit more about you and what do you do and how you work with people.
Sure. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you for having me on your TV show. So I'm a Tantra practitioner. I teach Tantra as a spiritual system, and I teach Tantra as a set of tools for intimacy. I teach couples and singles, sort of the uses of and the tools of Tantra to deepen their own intimacy and their own pleasure. And I use the tools of Tantra to help people come into the fullest possibilities of their heart and their body, as well as to release any trauma or other impediments that stand in the way of their greatest pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you're ready for all these amazing questions that everybody really wants and desire and has been asking, because man, we collected this question from so many forums and so many people asking and so many inquiries. So today is about sexual healing. So what is sexual healing?
Right. So I've been thinking about this, watch some of your other TV shows, seen some of the other ways people have answered this. So I have the benefit of all of their wisdom that they've offered. I want to note that I consider this to be two questions. One is, what are the modalities that describe themselves, that bring themselves to the world as sexual healing? And then the inner question of what is sexual healing itself? So the common modalities that people are going to run into that really bring sexual healing to our world right now are tantric healing and its somewhat more clinical counterpart, sexological bodywork. Also sacred intimacy and its somewhat more clinical counterpart, sexual surrogacy. So I think those four modalities really are the main hands-on, experiential, somatic approaches to sexual healing right now. That said, you can find people in any of those modalities who are not really doing sexual healing. And you can find people who are doing sex work, who are doing escort work, who are doing phone sex work, who are bringing sexual healing to people. So the inner question of what is sexual healing is when, in the context of sexual energy and sexual awareness and maybe sexual arousal, a person is met with pure flow of love. And this does not make me a sexual healer or anybody else. We're all our own sexual healer. And I think this is important because I'm even a little bit uneasy with the term sexual healing sometimes. Healing has in Western society, we think of doctors as being healers. We think of the medical profession. We think of psychiatry and psychology. And I ultimately think that what all of us in these different modalities and in some of the other forms of sex work are doing when we are facilitating healing is that we're really creating a space within which a person's own self-healing can happen. So I don't think of myself necessarily as a healer, but more as a guide or a teacher. You know, the Tantra word for this these days is sometimes Daka or Dakini, but you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, I just see that I am holding space for a person's healing and guiding them in the most beneficial ways to discover that.
Thank you for sharing that. So what is not sexual healing?
Well, so that gets, in some ways, that's a little bit easier. If you're looking at the modalities, then things that are not, most forms of sex work are not intended to be sexual healing. They're not trying to be sexual healing, although loving people often bring that to their work. Really, it's when, and this is where, you know, within the modalities that are striving to be sexual healing, this is where it's not sexual healing. It's not sexual healing when it's about the experience of the practitioner. If it's for the sense of validation, oh, I'm a great healer, it's not healing. If it's about my pleasure or you know, my satisfaction, it's not healing. The healing only happens when unconditional love in pure, perfect, conscious presence is brought to a person. So anything other than pure, perfect, conscious presence filled with love is not going to be sexual healing or any form of healing, ultimately.
Awesome. So we're going to be having a couple questions first, and then we're going to be going through everyone that's asking some questions already. So we're so excited. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Melanie, for sharing your insight. We're going to be reading those questions after 2 more questions that we have, okay? So stay with us. So how do you know sexual healing is for you?
So this is an interesting one because ultimately I feel like almost everybody in our society could benefit from some work with sexual healing. You know, especially if you think of it beyond the term healing, which implies that there's some kind of a problem. You know, all of us have growth and discovery. And a lot of times, you know, fumbling around with a lover, even a pretty good lover, is not the best way, or certainly not the fastest way to make some of those discoveries. Working with somebody who brings this as, you know, a study, as a profession, as a vocation, as a devotion, can open up things. So in a sense, this is for everyone. But in particular, some reasons that people might go to one of these practitioners is if there's sexual dysfunction. You know, anorgasmia, vulvodynia, vaginismus, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, retarded ejaculation. Those sort of common things are something where, you know, yes, drugs can help with some of these things, but honestly, the tools and technologies of Western medicine are crude and rather distressing. So those are great reasons to go see a practitioner. Painful sex, people who are disconnected from their body. I find this very common, where they can't really feel what they're feeling. That's something where working with a somatic practitioner of some sort or another is going to be far more beneficial than going to, say, a sex therapist who could coach you through some exercises and practices, but it's really the hands-on stuff that's going to integrate and connect those dots. People who want to integrate sexuality with their emotional intimacy, this is oftentimes disconnected and distorted in our culture. People who want to discover the connection between sexuality and spirituality might come to at least some, certainly the tantric family of practitioners. And people who want to simply discover more about the capabilities of their own body and their sexual experience could certainly benefit. And then sort of the big one that comes up a lot in these conversations is sexual trauma. Yep. People who have some kind of sexual trauma or emotional relationship trauma where there's been sort of extreme, you know, manipulation, betrayal, etc., can really benefit from the combination of energetic work that happens with certainly a tantric family of practitioner, and the touch, the somatic touch, the massage and the release that happens when the body feels itself held and touched with the presence of love.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. You mentioned great. You went deeper here. That's awesome. So how do you know it is not for you?
Well, so what I'd say, the main reasons that somebody comes into me and I say, I don't think you should be here. One is if somebody's telling them they should be here. You know, if somebody else is telling you, oh, you've got to go you've got to go to Matthias. He'll fix you, right? And you are uncomfortable with the idea and you don't really want to, but, you know, your best friend or your partner has told you that you've got to go get fixed and you reluctantly go in, I'm going to send you home because this is not the right time for this work for you. Similarly, people who have a lot of cognitive shame or obstacle to this kind of work, who are sort of unable to separate it from their preconceptions, maybe of prostitution, this may just not be the right modality, you know, or at least not at this time. You may need to go work with a sex therapist or a therapist, or maybe a different kind of trauma professional. EMDR is a good somatic approach to trauma, and you know, maybe those things would be more appropriate.
Great. So for those who don't know what MDR is, what does that stand for?
Oh, EMDR, it's, I'm not sure if I even remember the acronym. It's eye motion something or other. It's basically a combination of tapping and sort of eye position that has sort of a mysterious effect on releasing trauma. It's very effective with PTSD patients.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, yes. It's something like also like the work, what I love that you're bringing up, is the aspect of the powerful work of somatic work. This like opening up the body and helping the individual to heal in a very integrated way. It's like we know that just therapy talk doesn't just is not the only approach that we should take. Also just energy approach is not the only way, but when we include the body, it's really powerful to include all of that. So we have some, Melanie has said, full healers are in every industry, which that's what we do in this series, because we are here to clarify what actually we're doing and we're not doing, right? Todd, you have a question that is it wrong to want something not modality? I don't understand the question myself, but if Matthias understands it, he will be able to answer that. Is it wrong
let me
to want something not modality?
Hypothesize this one. If he's saying, is it wrong to want to go to a prostitute or go to an escort? Is it wrong to want to go to a phone sex worker? I don't think so. I have friends in all of those professions who do beautiful, beautiful work. I don't think you're necessarily going to get the same experience. You certainly can't rely or expect on having a healing experience unless, there's a great word of mouth chain that's directed you to somebody. But if you're called to visit a sex worker for any reason, I would say then listen to that call. There are risks associated with any of these modalities, and there's risks associated with sex work. Personally, I think that if somebody is really looking for an actual healing experience, they're going to be probably best served by going to somebody in an established healing modality. But I have no judgments, particularly if it's just here's a great reason to go to an escort. If you're single, maybe you're there's some impediment to relationship, and you just need some nurturing sexual touch. I think that is a fantastic reason to go to an escort, male or female. Right? I think that's a great reason. I think that it should be decriminalized in this world and honored as a beautiful profession, and people should be protected from abuse in all the levels of that profession. Right. So that's my rant on that. We're a little off topic maybe.
No, but I love and I really appreciate you recognizing the power of sex work I personally respect it. I honor it. I literally honor the women or men that do this type of work because they should be honored. And when they come from the free will, right? That's totally different story. And all, like you mentioned, like there are some people that need it. Like sometimes I have clients that come to me and they looking for that. And I'm like, well, I cannot give it to you, but it's for me, it's like, why don't you just try, and they have the fears and they have all of this that come up because sometimes you see like the beautiful, beautiful, loving men that they love their wife, but for some reason, some of them, their wife have disabilities. They have disabilities and they're not there sexually. And these men are so devoted that sometimes like it breaks my heart. And, I had to keep myself as a professional, but definitely I would say that if, sex work will be decriminalized and like these men will feel open to explore that, it will be so healing for them. But at the same time, we invite them to have open communication with their partners, right? Like to have really great communication with their partners about what actually they need and the desires and work it out. I feel like it would be a great idea to work it out, but that's a topic for another day, but it's part of the sexual healing experience, how we express it. So, Sylvie, thank you, Sylvie, for watching. She's actually saying that EMDR is eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So that's what it stands for. Yep. Thank you, Sylvie. I love you. So, this is my favorite question. Are there levels or stages of sexual healing?
So I have two answers for this one. The first answer is no. Healing is healing. And I get very skeptical of programs of healing that describe levels or stages. A lot of times this sounds to me more like a marketing plan than a healing plan. My other answer, though, is yes, because very often what happens is somebody comes in for one reason, and that's the first layer of an onion. We peel that back, we discover what the source of that is, and there's another layer underneath, and maybe another layer under that. So not in any sort of rigorous, structured way, I don't think there are levels and stages, but there's definitely a process.
Yeah.
And for many people, especially people who have a lot of early trauma, that trauma has created an energetic dynamic in their life that invites more trauma. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes working through those layers of trauma really can be quite an undertaking. But even in a simple scenario, there is definitely an arc to my work where a first session is really sort of a get-to-know-you session. It's a get-to-know your energy, get to know, discover whether this modality, this process, is right for me. And so a lot of times not a lot of, real substantive work is done in a first session. And that's sort of one stage. And then there's the getting real. Now let's get to, a lot of times people come in and, I ask them the question, have you had any sexual trauma? No. And I just don't feel like I can have the orgasm that my friends have, whatever. And then along about session 2 or session 3, there's like, well, I was raped by my father when I was 7. Is that important? Yes, that's important. So some of these things, sometimes once people realize that I'm safe, that this is a safe place for them to open up the stuff that's really going on. And then, of course, they knew what it was when they came in. They just were unable to speak it at that stage. So there's that sort of that second stage of sort of getting real. And then after that, we release that. We do the work of processing and releasing and, whatever needs to happen for whatever is actually there. And that may be it. And then sometimes, like I say, you get to the end of that process and you realize, oh, here's a whole another layer. Here's what that layer reveals. So I do think there are levels and stages, but I wouldn't actually trust anyone who said, okay, your first 3 sessions are this, and your second 3 sessions are that, and then you graduate to stage 2.
I love it. Thank you for keeping it so real and so practical. I love it. Yes, indeed. Like, we have these layers of like peeling off the onion that is here, and like we just releasing all that. So definitely. But I love that you pointed out that it's an awareness and a discernment to have when they market it that way, which is interesting. Which is a great point, because the session, from what I think I'm hearing from you, is that it's so unique and individualized that the individual, that, you know, it goes with the time how you actually create the sessions, and the power of the facilitator is like holding space. So I really love and appreciate that. Wait, let me just move my camera here a little more. Okay. So now let's go to is genital work a part of sexual healing? If yes, at what stage or, you know, layer of the process should be done, at the beginning or advanced stages?
Sure. So my answer is yes. Genital work is a part of sexual healing, but it's not a necessary part. It's possible, and I have people who've done all of their work without any touch. It's just been energy and coaching. Again, this depends a lot on what people are coming in with, you know, what they're dealing with. Sometimes there might be touch, you know, massage or some holding or some cradling or some cuddling or something like that, something non-sexual touch. And that's sort of the inflection point at which they really are released from their issues. But I think that, you know, the vast majority of people who are in one of these modalities are going to include genital touch, genital work, as an important and integral part of this. It's, you know, it's one of the things that separates it from, you know, sex therapy or coaching, which also has its role, but you know, we're a different role. Mm-hmm. Now, where it falls in the process of working with somebody varies very highly from person to person, and possibly from practitioner to practitioner as well. And location may put a role into it as well. For example, where I am here in Seattle, I find that most people, I work primarily with women, and most women who come to me have already done a lot of work. They have spent, you know, a decade in therapy. They've gone to see a sex therapist. They've done, you know, Ayurvedic healing and naturopath treatments, and they come to me because that stuff has only gotten them up to a certain point. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those people come in ready or nearly ready to begin with, you know, genital touch, genital work.
Yeah.
Be not in the first session, but sometimes even in the first session. So the real art of this is ascertaining where in a person's process, where in a person's self-discovery, where in a person's self-healing are they, and what do they need in order to be safe with any kind of intimate touch. Because I think for anybody, but possibly more particularly for women, bringing intimate touch to this, you know, sacred part of the body that may be holding some very real trauma, even if they don't call it trauma coming in. You know, sexual dysfunction often has roots in trauma, you know, known or unknown. So proceeding with an extraordinary amount of caution and ascertaining where in a person's work they are. But, you know, again, just you know, a place that's, you know, maybe less overall enlightened than, you know, a major West Coast city might be different. But I just find, for whatever reason, you know, people who come to me come in knowing what I do. There's no illusions or questions about what it is that I do. They're coming in with the expectation that there is going to be intimate touch. That's what I'm here for, as opposed to working with somebody else. So oftentimes, you know, we get to it pretty quickly. But I've certainly had situations where, you know, that would have been wildly inappropriate, and it may be, you know, a great number of sessions before there's any kind of intimate touch. I have, you know, one notable person I work who had extreme, like crazy extreme trauma, and it was almost 6 months of work before there was any kind of, you know, intimate touch. So it just varies very, very highly.
Yeah, and one of the amazing things that I'm finding with all these amazing practitioners in this field of sexual healing is the experience, the more experience that they have, the more they're sharing, like Matthias is sharing. It really is a process and a journey of discernment from the client and from that practitioner to see where they are, to even include that into their therapy, into their session. So really pay attention when you are out there looking for help and support in this realm, in this field. That's what we do in this, to educate and to share, to become aware. Discernment, it really is the key word with all this series. So really, really excited. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I love how practical you are. Great. So it's having sex with a client considered sexual healing. We're talking about a sacred prostitute, a lot of people talk about. And if yes, should be offered at the beginning of the journey or more advanced into the journey?
Yeah, so this is obviously a pretty hot button topic right now. And one thing that is really important to note is that some modalities would consider that to be wildly unethical. That would be completely out of bounds, and that it would not be considered sexual healing at all. Tantric healing in particular, as it's currently sort of commonly understood in our culture, has very clear offered boundaries. This varies a little bit from school to school. Mm-hmm. But most schools teach it this way. Touch is one directional. The practitioner is bringing loving touch, conscious, present, loving touch to the person who's sought them out. That touch is one directional, the pleasure is one directional, and there is no genital to genital contact, there's no oral to genital contact, there's no fluid exchange of any sort. This is keeping everybody safe. This is an important container and structure for sexual healing to occur. And from my perspective, from a healing perspective, this gets the job done. Tantric healing is a complete and coherent set of tools for helping a person release trauma, overcome whatever's between them and their best experience. So as a modality, tantric healing is, again, the word tantra is an ancient word. It refers to a vast spiritual tradition. A lot of the stuff that we're even talking about when we talk about tantric healing is a tiny sliver of what tantra actually is. So you can get into all kinds of debates about this. But when we talk about tantric healing or sacred spot massage or lingam massage or yoni massage, we are typically talking about a container that is very focused on the safety of the client, because anything outside those boundaries carries a lot more risk. Even within those boundaries, there's a lot of risk. So going outside those boundaries, if it's not necessary, and my theory is that it's never necessary for healing purposes, is a really big unnecessary risk. And one of the risks is this is where the potential shadow of the practitioner can emerge. If I am, bringing my lingam into the picture for sexual healing purposes, if I'm receiving pleasure, how do I stay perfectly clear that whatever this is purely for the benefit of the client? Because that is what would be absolutely necessary for that to happen. And again, it's not necessary for a healing purpose.
Yeah.
So that is my take on it from a modality perspective. But there's another side of it too. There's one of the modalities I mentioned in the beginning is what I call, what we call in this area sacred intimacy, the sacred intimate, which is probably similar to your idea of a sacred prostitute. And this is powerful, important, beautiful, deep work. This is sort of the corollary of the sexual surrogacy. Sexual surrogacy occurs in something of a more clinical structure where there's an overseeing sex therapist or medical doctor, and the practitioner is sort of under direction. Sacred intimacy, the sacred intimate is holding both of those spaces at the same time. And I do that work also. So for me, keeping these two very separate is the first important thing. Making sure that somebody who's coming to me understands what the boundaries of the container are, what the boundaries of the modality are, so that they can relax and be safe in those boundaries. And if a person is coming to me with a healing intention, then the modality that I use is going to be the tantric healing modality. But there are cases where experiencing a fuller experience and a fuller opportunity, and I tend to look at those as being educational experiences. Mm-hmm. So what if this happens where I've, and this is not a big part of my work. This is a very small percentage of people who come to me with these kinds of needs or a situation where this is important. But the sacred intimate work is really powerful when, for example, a woman who's 50 years old and has never had sex has decided that she's going to bring herself to that part of her life possibility. She's been immersed in a career, and she's sort of written herself off at an early age as asexual, and she's woken up in her 40s and discovered that maybe she's not asexual, but she's terrified. There's no particular healing that needs to happen in this individual case, but she's terrified of presenting herself as completely ignorant at an age where nobody's completely ignorant. If you're 16, that's fine. If you're 18, that's fine. But when you're 50, there's a lot of shame around never having had any of this experience. Yeah. So in that, again, there's still boundaries. They're very clearly defined session by session. There's still a container. The modality has its structure as well. But in that case, the person having bidirectional touch, the person learning how to touch, learning how to give pleasure, learning what some of these other experiences are like, that can be really powerful. So it can be sort of an educational role in a very hands-on way that a person can't really experience any other way. Now, a lot of people will say, well, your first experiences with a lover, are going to be somewhat awkward and somewhat fumbling, and that's just the way it is to be human. And maybe that's true, and maybe that's the way it should be, but my take on it is, that's definitely true when we're young, and we're all exploring together, and we're all floundering around together, and we're discovering how wonderful it all is. But later in life, fast-tracking ourselves to catch up with the rest of everyone in the world can have a real value. In that case, it's still not something that I would do at the beginning. If somebody came in, hey, I want to have sex, I'd be like, that is a lovely desire. Here's how my work works. First we learn what touch is. First we learn how to touch consciously. And then we build layer upon layer, measuring safety the whole way. Because the big fear here is any kind of entanglement or attachment where somebody's falling in love with their practitioner. Mm-hmm. And once you start getting some of these body chemistry things going, that becomes a real possibility. So it's really important. The boundaries in the container become even more important in this modality, which doesn't bring, its own inherent, this is what a session has to look like kind of boundaries. Now we have to negotiate everything. And we have to be very, very clear and careful with everything.
Yes, I love what you mentioned and bringing to the table right now, because on the table, not in the table, underneath the table. I'm just gonna make you laugh.
Congratulations on doing so well on your English test. I saw that on Facebook.
Yeah, thank you. My reading part of it, I still had to do writing, so we're still working on it. So thank you for bringing this up, because it's so important to be aware that the steel container, there's still boundaries. There are boundaries here. There is a level of sacredness and understanding, and also what I love is that you point out the aspect of the attachment. I can imagine even in my own work with different modalities I have, even as a massage therapist, or even doing coaching, or even different kind of things that I can do. I can still feel some people they have attachments, right? And then they want more and they want more and they want more. You know, you give them like one little finger and they want the whole arm after like a couple hours. Yeah. And it's like, woo! So I can imagine the level of feeling safe, like within yourself as a practitioner, to be able to offer this work, because it's really, you have to be really centered. As we know, like we human beings, we chemical beings, and all these oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, and all these beautiful, chemicals that can drug us in an experience itself. And as you mentioned, the aspect of the ego of the practitioner can come into, if the practitioner is not aligned, is not holding that container, this whole cocktail of drugs within ourselves, it can make the whole thing messy. So thank you for clarifying it, because that's where there's a lot of confusion in here. There's a lot of messiness in this. So the question...
Go ahead. And we see what happens, with that messiness. There's a lot of abuse. A lot of people who, I hope are ultimately very, well-intentioned in their highest self, have made poor judgments or violated the boundaries of their modality in ways that just create an incredible amount of confusion, adding trauma on top of trauma instead of releasing them. So again, the risks for not doing this right are very high.
Thank you. So when we're talking about genital work, should orgasm be part of it, of the experience, or expected?
Well, I would not say expected, no. Really, one of the essences of any of this work, and I know that I'm going to agree with some of your prior interviewees as well, is letting go of all expectations, letting go of all outcomes, because that outcome-oriented, goal-oriented sexuality is inherently antithetical to all of the experiences that people are wanting to get out of this. If people want to integrate with their body, chasing an orgasm is not going to help. If people want to integrate with their emotional body or connect intimacy and emotional, chasing an orgasm is not going to help. Having an orgasm, chasing an orgasm is not going to help. So, one of the things that I tell everybody is that, orgasm is not the point. The point of coming to see me is not, I want to have an orgasm. And I know Heather said this as well. But what about if somebody comes in and their presenting condition is anorgasmia, and that's actually what they want? They want to have an orgasm. Great. Yes. In that case, it's still the case that in a session, orgasm is not the point. The point is to slow down and discover the full possibilities of our body. A very, very common thing that I see in women who come to see me is women who can have their orgasm on their own, but can't have it with a partner. And sort of what happens there is they've developed a self-pleasuring technique that's very, very specific and very efficient. And nobody is going to get that right. Mm-hmm. So first of all, their expectation, I just need a better lover. No, nobody is going to get your secret little move exactly right. Only you. That's your secret, secret joy, and you should keep that a secret. But by thinking that's the only thing the only way your body can experience pleasure or experience an orgasm, you're denying yourself a whole world of pleasure. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't even really like the word orgasm, because once we move beyond that sort of one thing that we've sort of trained ourselves to expect is an orgasm, we start to discover a whole three-dimensional tapestry where there's all kinds of waves of pleasure that we might or might not call orgasms. And when two people can play in those waves together, that's when spiritual things start to happen.
Such an orgasmic experience. Like having this orgasmic experience when you go to just outside of your house, feeling the breeze of the weather, like the sun getting to your skin and just flowing into it, and just having that experience of like that sensation in your whole body feels like tingling and like, amazing. It's giving ourselves permission to feel that alive.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you. So can sexual healing not involve genital work, sexual erotic massage, or copulation? For those who don't know what copulation is having sex.
So yes, absolutely. Sexual healing can involve sessions where none of that happens. Some people come to me. I also do Reiki and energy work, and some people come to me with sexual dysfunctions, and they're looking for a no-touch, energy-only experience. And yes, that can absolutely happen.
Great.
And I would still consider that, sexual healing. And I would still consider that self-healing. We're just creating the space for a person's own body to release what it needs to release. So yes, absolutely.
Yes, and also what I'm hearing from what is happening in the past year, and with everything that we see in society right now, a lot of Reiki practitioners, and they coming up and coming out and actually saying I do kind of feel like I'm doing sexual healing with my Reiki because I'm helping these individuals with the the energy and the Kundalini and all that stuff. So it's when they totally open, I feel like into that energy, we can actually feel healing. So let's go into the one question that is actually the reason of these series. And the reason why we bring amazing people like Matthias, and we brought Heather and other people, and then Rita. So what are the code of ethic sexual healers should have with clients, even for those who offer sexual work as part of it? And I know Matthias has been sharing a whole bunch of this, but guys, let's get clear and more direct on this.
Yeah, well, so I mean that's actually, in some ways I think that's too big of a question. We could do a whole show just on that question. I'm currently working on developing a code of ethics. There's not a universal code of ethics that everybody ascribes to. It just doesn't exist. A couple of modalities, the Sexological Bodywork School, they have a code of ethics, which is a pretty good one. It's got a couple of gaps, and it's also somewhat particular to their style. IPSA, which is the organization for surrogacy work, they have a code of ethics for their practitioners, which again, it's a really good guideline for any sex work. But there's a few things that are very specific to that, the structure of that kind of work. So there is no existing code of ethics. So I and a few other people are working on sort of developing one that we could offer. Now, part of the tricky thing about this is that different schools, teach people with different boundaries. Boundaries can be different in different parts of the world. I found that, for example, here in the United States, it's, a practitioner always keeps their clothes on, or at least their genitals covered. That's almost never the case in Europe. In Europe, tantric healing is almost always done with both practitioners nude, even if there's not going to be any genital contact. They think it would be crazy to keep your clothes on. You're keeping a barrier between our energy bodies. And we think it's crazy to take your pants off if you don't need to take your pants off. So what would be a code of ethics that would really work for all of this? I think ultimately the single most important thing that runs beneath any possible code of ethics is that the welfare of the client has to be the number one priority. Do no harm has to be the number one priority. And because where problems occur is when boundaries or areas of consent are violated. There needs to be a guideline for how to have this conversation around what the boundaries are. And ultimately, I don't particularly care what the boundaries are. And different modalities can say their boundaries are different from each other. That's fine. But regardless of the modality, it's crucial for the student or the client or whatever you want to call that person to have an opportunity to be extremely explicit about what they want and don't want. And for them to understand what the boundaries of the modality or the practitioner are so they can have a very clear idea of what to expect. That way, if there's a violation of that, accidental or otherwise, there's no ambiguity. I fucked up the other day, and I crossed somebody's boundaries. A woman came into me, and she didn't want any touch on her feet. She came in on session number 1. She didn't want any touch on her feet. She came in on session 2, and I failed to re-clarify that boundary. And I went to sort of do my usual thing and just give her a little foot massage. And she's like, wait. I'm like, oh, shit. I just crossed your boundary. So that's a serious thing. Now, that's not going to be a sexual trauma for her. She was just worried. She had a little bump on her foot, and, she wanted to make sure it got medically checked out before she had any massage on that. But that's a boundary crossing. It's really clear that it's a boundary crossing because we had a conversation about it. Mm. So, I had the opportunity to immediately say yes, to take responsibility for that. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. That is completely my fault. Do we need to stop this session? Well, no, she's like, it was fine. Just, so it wasn't a problem for her, but it's certainly a problem for me, because that's something that should never happen. But of course, we're human. Things do happen. Mm. And the only way that you can then have a really healthy, response is when we're super clear on, what's in and what's out. And then, at any point, the person who's receiving this work has the opportunity to add more boundaries, can say no to everything. And that's where it's very important in the process of the work to ensure that the person actually has their own power of saying no. Mm. So I do some tests around that along the early parts of the first couple of sessions to see if a person's able to say no, to say, I'm not. So inside the session, we never loosen the boundaries. She's like, oh yeah, I know I didn't want my feet touched, but actually go for it. I think it's going to be all right. I'd be like, great, thank you for that desire. We can talk about that next time. Mm. But oh, I forgot to tell you, I really don't like it when somebody touches the small of my back. Great. So that's the sort of the principle I think is behind it. All codes things. But there's a lot of other things too. Situations around. Well, what happens if I fall in love with my client or my practitioner? Is it appropriate to date my client? No, it's not appropriate to date your client. But there might be a way to end your professional relationship, have a cooling down period, and then if everyone still feels excited about this. I don't want to stand in the way of true love if it miraculously happens. And I've seen some cases where that has happened, and it's been beautiful. So, there's just areas where a code of ethics provides guidelines for how to keep everyone safe. And in particular, how to protect practitioners from their shadow and clients from their practitioners in a way that ensures everyone's healthy. So I think code of ethics is really important, but sort of doing a bullet point numbering would take me all day.
Mm. I'm just breathing all that in because I feel that beside of all the amazing insight that you share, also you share your vulnerability as a practitioner and sharing with all of us that it's okay to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I screwed up. I did not check in with my client's boundaries. And this is so precious to hear in our society, that level of responsibility and accountability and vulnerability to say, yes, I have to check in with myself. So I really, really, really honor you and appreciate you. And now I know why Heather told me, hey, you got to check out Matthias, and he's the guy. And I really, really love it. So I appreciate you so much, because this is healing. Like, for women, saying like, yeah, that's not a big deal. It's just okay. Don't end the session. But for you to actually ask for it, it's kind of like create this safety, like create more safety into the container, and really, really, really love that. So thank you so much. I'm still breathing. So do you feel clients who are looking for sexual healing from sexual trauma enroll into a process or journey of purging before experiencing sexual touch from a qualified practitioner?
So this kind of echoes something I said earlier. This is going to depend a lot on the person and what sort of work they've done before coming to a practitioner. Ultimately, I would say yes. From the perspective of somebody who needs sexual healing, and I've gone through my own personal process of sexual healing. Yes, that is exactly what happens. Where that happens may vary, case to case. I did, years of therapy before I even heard that hands-on sexual healing was an option. So I did a lot of journey and a lot of preparation before I even knew what I was preparing for. I did a lot of purging, before I knew even exactly what that meant. So different people come in, to a practitioner in a different place. And for some people, that may be the very beginning of their journey. For many people, it's somewhere along the journey.
Yeah. Thank you. So, how can we tell who is a qualified practitioner?
Well, unfortunately, there's no good way. There's no single way. There's no directory of people who are guaranteed to be qualified. No certification from any school is a guarantee that they're a qualified practitioner. And there are people who have never gone to any school who are qualified practitioners. So, I think that having had some direct intentional education is a good thing, and I would advise anyone who wants to go into this field to start there. It's not a guarantee of qualification. What I say to this when I'm really talking to potential clients, consider the professional presentation of the practitioner. Do they have a informative, thorough website that tells what they do, or something equivalent? Do they have a Facebook page that's very, very clear on what they do? Do they give you enough information about who they are, why they're doing it, what they do, for you to feel confident that this is a person's vocation and not a person's, sexy little hobby? Word of mouth is great. If you can get a recommendation from somebody who has been to this practitioner, that helps. Again, it's no guarantee. Some people have a great experience with somebody, and then the next person comes along and they have a terrible one. So there is no guarantee. But I think the most important thing is every person thinking about this work should avail themselves of a consultation with a practitioner. Don't go in for the first time asking for a session. Almost every practitioner will do some form of consultation. Maybe it's a phone call. I generally prefer, an in-person visit, but whatever works. So you can get all your questions answered so that you can, as a client, as a student, you can get an intuitive sense of whether this person is the right person for you. Yeah. And that might not have anything even to do with qualifications. I consider myself a qualified practitioner, but not everybody who comes to me, I'm not going to be the right practitioner. Sometimes somebody comes to me and at the end of the consultation, we're like, you know what? I think that a female practitioner is going to be the right person for you, given what you're telling me. Or somebody comes to me and although I'm pretty clear on my website, it turns out that they do want something that's more or different than what I offer. So having an in-person or a really good video call is the best way to tell whether this person is the right person for you. You'll never really know, though, until, the hands go on. And that's why I consider a first session to be very much a evaluation experience. I'm evaluating where this person is. They're evaluating what this work is and whether I'm the right person to be doing this work with. Yeah.
So you offer complimentary consultations, right? For people to get to know you before.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And every practitioner I know does something similar.
Yeah.
Not everyone's willing to make it a 1 hour sit down and we're going to have tea. Some people it's got to be a phone call or a video call and it's, 15 minutes. And I have to say, especially, this is kind of sad to say, but there are many men who avail themselves of that consultation in order to have a little sexy phone call. And they're not really planning on getting any work at all. They're just trying to get a free phone sex call, or they're sort of excited by the idea of it, but they're not really going to go anywhere. So I understand women who want to keep that consultation, fairly well bounded.
Yeah, they have those. Like they just keep putting it on you, and you're like, oh, please, he is the link of my site for you to go and fill out intensive intake form before you even get on the phone with me. So I personally So anybody who decides to work with me, I personally don't get on the phone with anybody before they get into my intake form, which helped me to really know what are they about and how can I help them, because I can just help with coaching or just coaching or just energy and
right.
then
and that makes perfect sense. I totally understand that. But I would still say in any of these situations, there should be some opportunity for a person that basically interview, the practitioner before they let the work begin.
Yes, and that's what I feel like. I usually offer my, after like a whole long intake form, I feel like people get really the sense of like, I'm really there for them. And also after we get on the phone, it's all about them, just to see like how we can help. So really, really important. Thank you for sharing all that. So I'm going to read to you guys. Matthias has a version of it on his computer, but I'm going to read it to you guys because during these interviews and these conversations, something came up which is very important. So let me just read it to you guys. And all right, so finally, these questions are to bring awareness to practitioners and teachers of sexual healing, daikinis, training, and certifications. Of the many trainings and certifications I have personally participated in, or I'm aware from other colleagues who have taken all the training from recognized sacred sexuality schools, genital touch, massage, or de-hammering is taught from the beginning of the certification training without proper pre-emotional and psychological preparation of the trainee. We find these certifications are offered to anyone without pre-qualifications and screening. We have witnessed re-traumatization, re-trauma, happening because deep wound or emotional triggers come up to the surface, and these are not properly addressed and supported with practical tools during the training because of the lack of time. We have witnessed new practitioners start doing healing work with genitals from the beginning of their practice because that's how it was taught to them. And that's how also they experience sexual healing. While more experienced practitioners, like the one that we interviewing, are continuing to discuss whether sexual touch may or may not be a part of it, of the sexual healing session. It is not something that is offered in the first session. It may take them over 10 sessions before they experience simple conscious touch in their body without genital touch. So the question that we have, and Matthias is going to wrap it up with, is should these schools offer certifications involve genital touch, reevaluate their curriculum, and create pre-requirement for programs addressing emotional psychological concepts and provide practical tools that can be offered in person or online before their certification training? Should these schools offer support to their new practitioners after their trainings, create continuing education programs, and provide resources for the students to keep a high level of professionalism and integrity in this field? Should schools create an accountability system to sustain the integrity of this practice? And finally, what can we as practitioners do to create the safest container of healing for our clients?
Yeah. So yes, I think that, so there's several schools, and they have different approaches, and they have different ways of attempting to do some of the stuff that you've discussed here. Overall, I would say I don't know of any school that does this adequately at this time. I know that Caroline Carrington is starting a school, and it's very much her intention to be accomplishing these kinds of goals for her students. I haven't heard, I don't know the details of it. I don't know how successful it's been, but I think that we're at a sort of a generational cycle in the way that this work is. Despite the fact that Tantra is thousands of years old, this work is like 20 or 30 years old. This is not an ancient lineage of work that we're working with here. This is applying the tools of a embodied system towards sexual healing and working with sexual energy for healing purposes And it's sort of floundering and finding its way. It doesn't help that much of the work is illegal, or of questionable legality, of gray area. This makes it a lot harder to establish anything like a formal, clear body to hold everybody accountable, because, everybody involved with something like that could get in trouble.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of where I've seen this in the schools that I have attended, and in talking to practitioners who've been through other programs. There's a lot of sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge going on, where a lot of the things that would get a teacher in legal liability for what their student might do doesn't speak clearly, and that leaves a scenario in which students go out without clarity. So this is a real problem. So yes, I think that educating sexual healers, regardless of the modality, I'd say the best organization for this is Sexological Bodywork.
Yeah.
They're taking this most seriously, and they're taking the ethics of it, and they're taking the accountability most seriously.
Yeah.
But that modality is not really my modality. There's some things about their modality. The spiritual component is crucial for me, and some of their boundaries don't work that well for me. So I don't think that's the end of the story, but I think they are the first organization to take a credible step beyond the 60s, basically.
Yes.
And I think that there's more steps required. And your questions here, should schools do this? Yes, 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 and yes. This is the kind of thing that sort of the next generation, I would expect the next generation of schools to do. And I want to emphasize that I think the most important one is the accountability system.
Yeah.
I think, encouraging further education, better preparation, maybe some things around sort of verifying and validating a person's readiness for the work. That is currently done, maybe not in the best way, but that stuff is, people are sort of progressing on that. But where most practitioners end up is, okay, I've graduated, I've got my certificate, and here I am, ready to do the work. And there's no ongoing mentor-student relationship or accountability partner relationship or anything. And that's true for me, except for the fact that my wife and I did all of the schooling together, and she is my accountability partner. Now, she's not an unbiased observer, but she's very helpful for asking the kinds of questions that I neglect to ask myself sometimes. And that has been invaluable for helping me avoid some big mistakes, or keep myself from making mistakes. I guess that's the same thing. Or addressing areas where I need to redirect, to course correct with somebody. So that kind of accountability system is the most crucial part for me.
Yeah.
Taking this to the next level. And then we may discover there's more still after that. Who knows?
Yeah. So I really appreciate your insight. And if anybody have any final questions before we wrap it up, just type them now, quick, before we let go, Matthias. So how can we find you, for anybody who's interested in your work, where they can go and create some kind of book, a consultation with you?
You can find me at matthias-rose.com. And there was one other question that you had on the list you sent me that you didn't ask, which is, where can clients find practitioners in general?
Yes, thank you for reminding me that one.
And there's not a great directory. The directory that some people who are looking for sexological body work, the school has a directory. For people who are looking for some of the more spiritual work, there's a website called sacrederos.com.
Yeah.
And it's not complete or comprehensive, but it's got some possibilities.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that there is that there is a network amongst practitioners. Oh, I know a lot of other practitioners. I know who's good in your town and who's maybe not so good.
Yeah.
So if you can find a practitioner somewhere in the world that looks trustworthy to you, it's worth reaching out to them and say, hey, I can't come to Seattle, but do you know anybody in Miami? Mm-hmm. I'll be like, well, I'm not sure, but let me check around. and sometimes I do. Sometimes I find somebody great. Sometimes I don't. But that's worth trying.
Yes, it's still so important. And Sacred Eros is created by Betty. What's her last name? Betty Martin. Betty Martin. And she is actually the creator of conscious touch, right? Like she really has this amazing workshop about conscious touch. Really fascinating stuff.
Her concept is the wheel of consent.
Yes.
Where we learn different directions of touch, of experiencing touch consciously. It's a powerful system that many people have taken up. And one day, I hope she publishes her damn book.
I know. I've been emailing her about it. I'm waiting for it.
Yeah. And she's also involved with sexological bodywork as well.
Yes. She's amazing. So you can go to sacrederos.com. She really, anybody who advertised there is, she really filtered everyone. She just doesn't accept anyone. So she really checked you out because I'm there. So she really checked you out. She had to know who are you, what are you there for, and like your wording, like how you put your stuff there. So really a good site to go. So repeat your website, please, for everybody to catch it at the last.
Yeah, Matthias-rose.com.
Awesome. So it's your first name dash your last name.com.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Matthias, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Lucia. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone for showing up today. Thank you for all of you who have stayed all the time. All your comments, Melania, Sylvie, Todd. Thank you all of you guys for sharing your insight. And here again, we're going to have another amazing practitioner on Monday in the afternoon, I believe 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we are still having these amazing conversations. I'm truly committed to bring amazing people that they are working with this in this field from a level of integrity, honor, respect, professionalism, and creating, I feel like this is going to be a great archive for a lot of people who want to know about what sexual healing is and from different perspectives and like having more clarity. So I'm really committed to bring more of these conversations and I feel like all of us who are participating here today and the other days and other interviews are really a part of this movement where we are going to see next generations of sexual healers a little bit more clear and the boundaries more set, the code of ethics. So I'm really excited to be part of this movement. So I'm really happy. So if you want to find out more about us, you can go to luciagabriela.com. That's my website. Or if you're in Florida, you can come to Nuna Holistic Retreat Center for Emotional and Sexual Healing. So check us out and we'll see you next time. Love you, everyone. Bye.